Hello and welcome everyone to Christian Fiction Fans. We are here tonight with Janine Rosche, the author of The Road Before Us, which is just a super fun Route 66 road trip novel. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about her and then we'll dive into some questions. So she writes women's book club fiction that celebrates life, love, and family without shying away from the struggles and heartache we experience along the way. She finds inspiration for her novels from travels to rustic yet breathtaking destinations all across the United States. She resides in Ohio with her husband, four children, two spoiled Labrador retrievers, and she's traveled all over the United States. She also has a background in family life education, and she has a quarterly digital magazine called Love, Wander, and Read. And it sounds like that combines all of her favorite things. So that might be something fun for you to check out as well. So, welcome, Janine. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Deb, for having me.
It's a delight. And so Janine and I got to meet in person last month, which was so fun. And she's an Ohio girl, and I grew up in Ohio. So we've got this fun connection there too. Why don't you start by telling us about your journey to become an author? Is this something you always dreamed of, or did it just fall in your lap? How did it happen?
So this is not, it's not really anything that I ever thought was possible. My dad was an author
Oh,
and he was the initial expert of personal computers back in like the late 70s and early 80s, and he had published a whole bunch of books about personal computing.
wow.
And And then I saw what it looked like when the contract doesn't keep coming in. And to me, it was like, oh, who would want to become an author?
Yeah.
It's such highs and lows. And so I think that's why I never really considered it. And it wasn't until probably I was about 25 and I was a stay-at-home mom and I was trying to make it as a mommy blogger and writing about families and all the things that, I had studied for years. And I read Redeeming Love, and it was life-changing for me. And I thought you can actually write stories like this where not only is it a beautiful story that touches like every single emotion, but also it can have a faith element to it. And so that was what got me thinking about writing fiction, but it wasn't until I was, I think, 35 and my dad had just passed away. And the last thing we had done together was we had gone to a writing group that he was a part of down in Florida because he was trying to write his first novel. And he wanted me to come to that because he said I was always a good writer. And that was the last thing we did. And so I think I started writing to process some of the grief that I was feeling. And then one day somebody said, you should try to get this published, which I think is how a lot of these authors
Yeah.
have come to that point is they write something and there's that one, two, 10 people who go, this is good. Other people will want to read that. And that's what started my journey.
That means you had to show your work to somebody. You had to share it. And that's really vulnerable. And a lot of people
Oh,
write in the closet and hide it in the drawer, so to speak. So, was this part of that writing group that got you started, or how did you find the courage to share it?
so about 2 years before I really started writing, I had a story in my brain that would not go away. Now, I have to preface this by saying that when I was in third grade, I used to get in trouble all the time for fantasizing. I wouldn't be paying attention to what was happening at school because I would just be imagining all these different scenarios and what might happen at the playground or what might happen with the boy that I liked. And there was always a boy involved. Um, and finally, one of my teachers, Miss Skernolis, she didn't get me in, I wasn't in trouble for kind of,
Yeah.
losing attention and focusing elsewhere. She said, "You know what? It's not bad to imagine stories in your head, but why don't you write them down?" And so that was the first time I realized, maybe I can actually do something with this. And so then we fast forward, think I'm like 33 or something, and had this story in my brain that I just kept imagining would not leave me alone. So I decided I'm just going to write it down. So I wrote down 2 chapters and I asked my husband to read it, which was a bad idea. My husband does not read fiction. He certainly does not read romance. And I didn't know how to write. I didn't know how to develop characters. This was very raw. And he read it and he started laughing at the wrong point. And I shelved it for 2 years and thought, okay, forget it. I'm not going to do it. And then, like I was saying, after my dad passed away, I decided, you know what? I am gonna pull up my big girl pants and I'm gonna write this story. And I offered it to all my Facebook friends and I said, hey, I'm going to do something. I should really try to find my post where I
Yeah.
said, where I initially asked people, like, would anybody be interested in reading this if I wrote it? And I would write a chapter and post it, and
Uh-huh.
write a chapter and post it. I mean, it was raw, it was not edited. It would be awful to go back and read. But that's kind of how I got my start. I had 40 friends the first book read it along with me. So that was really sweet of my friends to be so encouraging.
Yeah. So they read it one chapter at a time on Facebook.
Yes.
Well, when we go way back to some of these very classic authors, that's how they got their start, only was in the newspaper. They would write these serial things that would come out one chapter at a time. So I don't
Yes.
think you're that
Yeah.
far off base.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about your dad's novel. Did he get very far on that? Whatever happened with that?
He never finished it. So I believe he had a novel way back when,
Okay.
and he might have finished that one. This was more, it was a series of like short stories,
Mhm.
and he had finished a few of them. And they were super quirky. My dad was really smart and he was very funny. And when you put those two things together,
Oh,
you get some weird stuff. But he never got it published, but yeah, he did have a couple really good ones in there.
fun. Fun. So now, how many books have you written at this point?
I have written 6 books.
And they're all published because some of our authors tell us about the books that are not published as well.
I only have 2 books that are sitting somewhere that
Yeah.
haven't been published. I was able to turn multiple of my stories that I wrote before I even considered publishing. I was able to turn a couple of those into books. There was a lot of revision that had to happen, but I was able to use those. And then I'm hoping to self-publish the one story, well, both of the stories, probably within the next year.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. Instead of just having them hide on a file in your computer, why
Hmm.
not? Why not?
Right, right.
Very good. So, and The Road Before Us, is that the most recent one that's been published?
Yes, that
Okay.
that one came out last summer,
Uh-huh.
and that is the most recent one. I have another one coming out next fall with Sunrise Publishing. But yeah, this is my baby for a while.
Very good. Well, I loved it, and I think a lot of
Thank
other
you.
people did too. How long did it take for you to write that first novel? You said it was kind of a serial thing, but the first one that got published, how about
The
that?
very, so once I actually started writing, I think it took me 6 weeks. And yeah, that was it,
Six
which is a
weeks.
very, very short amount of time to
That is
write a
short.
novel.
Yeah, for a draft one. And then how
And
long did it take in revisions?
oh my goodness. Well, I didn't do any revisions for that one. I just posted it. And it was about, so typically, like The Road Before Us, that was about 85,000 words. The first book that I wrote was like 120,000
I got
because I did not know how to write concisely at
yeah,
all. So yeah, that was a long book. Most books that are 120,000 words are like Lord of the Rings
yes,
type books.
epic fantasy. Yeah, yeah, that's
Right.
a long book.
Yeah. And so so when I first got my first publishing contract, it was what was supposed to be the sequel to that first book. And I thought that one seems way more marketable. It seemed to follow more of the rules. And
Yeah,
so that was the one that I was really pitching. And I got interest from, it was actually a general market publisher who was looking to start publishing Christian fiction.
okay.
And they liked it, but they said this, I still don't really know what this means, but they said this isn't a debut novel. And I
Okay.
don't know if they meant it's not gonna blow the doors open.
Hmm.
That's kind of what I thought. Like it doesn't have that really strong hook.
Yeah,
I thought it did, obviously, but they didn't. And so I said, well, I have this other idea, and it was going to follow that book,
yeah.
but maybe I could flip it. And she loved the idea, but I hadn't written it. So that one I only had another 6 weeks to write it
Yeah.
from scratch.
Wow.
And then the revisions, I think once my editor got it, it was probably 3 months, 3 or 4 months of just going
Mhm.
back through it word by word, comma by comma, trying
Yes.
to figure it out.
Yeah. Wow, what a process. So let's talk a little bit about this cool Route 66 book. So for you, which came first, the characters or the story?
So I always used to say, I'm going to write a Route 66 book. And I would
Okay.
talk about it, my Route 66 book. And it was going to be about some group of travelers going from Chicago to Santa Monica. I had no idea what what else that would entail. And then at some point I had the idea of I think I watched a documentary on non-custodial parent kidnapping and how devastating it is in every way. And how we totally vilify. What is we make a villain out of the kidnapping parent, and rightfully so. I mean, in a lot of cases, but you also hear stories of the reason why they felt they had to, and a lot of times it was to protect the child from an
Yeah.
abuser. um but that doesn't change the fact that they've done something illegal. And so I liked playing around with the idea of seeing this person as a hero that everybody else sees as, a villain.
Yeah.
And so Jade's character and her story started coming into play. And then as far as all the other characters, I used to dream, being a high schooler in Ohio, I used to dream about what it would be like to go out to Hollywood and try to make it as an actress. And, obviously, I never put a lot of thought into it, but it was a thought in my head. So that always fascinated me, the idea of somebody wanting to go out and try their hand at Hollywood. So that's where Benny's character came along.
So you have the story, you start pulling in different characters, and then how do you develop that so that, I mean, this has got a range of a bunch of very different characters with some really
A
big
lot of
backstories. How do you come
and
up with all that?
a lot of different issues. I was laughing with my writing friends. I was like, I don't know if I could fit any more issues into a book. But when I traveled Route 66, I knew that there were going to be a few things that I touched on. But as I got to know each town and the history and the different people who had traveled that road, it it showed me how many different situations and issues people have had to deal with over the route's 100-year history. Actually, more than 100 years, because even before it was Route 66, part of it was the Trail of Tears. Part of it was the Mormon Road. There were a lot of different, I think. Yeah, I think just like a small part of it was like the route that the Mormons would have taken to get out to Utah. So there were just these little bits of like different people's issues that they were dealing with. And I had to somehow represent that. Maybe I didn't need to shove it all in one book, but that's what I did.
Okay, so you mentioned this, and I was going to ask you about this. Your trip on Route 66, you took your own little journey. Tell us about your trip, why you did it, what you discovered on the road.
So when I decided I was going to write my Route 66 book, and I had gotten a contract on it without having written it yet. I think I had like the first three chapters. So I knew, okay, this is going to be it. I drove to Chicago, which was, I mean, that took me 5 hours from where I lived back then to even get to Chicago. And then you start the 2,400 mile journey. And I had to break it up into two sections because I couldn't be away from my four kids that long.
Yeah.
Um, so I did it. I did 2 weeks and then I came back and did another 2 weeks. So I did Chicago to St. Louis and stopped at all of these small historic 1950s hotels, most of which were wonderfully renovated and still keeping that style.
Fun.
There, where you go in and there's not a TV on the wall,
My
and
goodness.
because why would there have been?
Right.
Or there's just soft oldies playing on this vintage radio, and it was just some of these places are so cool. Some of them are not. I had two different experiences with hotels along the route that created the first hotel that they stay in on their trip when Jade says it smelled like somebody died in here and he had pickles in his pockets. That's actually what I experienced at one of the hotels. It was the most disgusting place I have ever been. So, um, so it was interesting, but those moments they paled in comparison to all the really cool, fascinating things. There were some amazing museums. There are amazing cars if you like classic cars, great food. And then, like I was saying, the stories of each town is just remarkable. And what different people had to go through when they were living there. So, like when I went to Tulsa and I got to learn about the Tulsa Uprising Massacre of 1921. Driving through Oklahoma City and seeing the site of the bombing from 1995, 1993, 1995, and just experiencing that, and then heading out west and oh, Santa Fe and Tucumcari. I mean, just some really, really cool towns. And it was just such a blessing that I was even able to take that trip. And then I got to take another one to promote the book. So I got to hit all my favorite spots again.
But um, I had a question. Oh, how old were your kids when you were leaving them for your road trip?
Okay, so let me see. Um, 18. How many years ago was this? So this was like 3 years ago.
Okay.
So 18, 14, 13, and 9. And they wanted to go with me. And my kids are big road trip kids.
Oh,
I
fun.
raised them to
Uh-huh.
just know. It's so funny. I was thinking this the other day. My kids have never once said, "Are we there yet?" on a road trip, which I don't know what I did, but they absolutely love just heading out on the road, sleeping in the car, waking up super early, staying in hotels. They love it all. And so they wanted to go with me, but they had school. One of the bad things about traveling Route 66 is it really is only a lot of the places along the road are only in operation a few months out of the year.
Really?
Uh, they really open up like April 1st,
Okay.
and then they end like mid-October or like
Hmm.
end of October. So keep that in mind if you ever decide to make the trip. You do
Yeah.
not want to go in January or February because nothing will be open. But
Interesting.
even in the middle of the summer months,
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's too hot for them to be open. So,
Mhm.
and a lot of people, they don't want to drive through the deserts. So, not a lot of people travel it. So, the
Yeah.
shops close down.
Huh.
So, yeah, I didn't have a lot of choices. I think
Yeah.
my trip was all in September, which was the perfect time. I didn't have to deal with the snow in the
Yes.
mountains. I didn't have to deal with the crazy heat in the Mojave Desert. It was perfect.
Fun. Now, I also read in some materials you sent over to me that you have a little more history on Route 66 that tell us about that.
Yeah. Do you mean like with my parents?
Yeah, you had mentioned that your dad also made that trip.
Yes, yes. So in 1961, my dad was 18 years old. He had just graduated from high school and he was joining the military.
Okay.
And to get out to basic training, he had to go from Syracuse, New York, out to Merced, California, or right around there. So he took Route 66 in 1961, which really was the heyday for Route 66. That's when, if you've ever seen the movie Cars and they have that scene where they light up all the neon lights and they're playing music, that was when that would have occurred. And he had a 57 Ford Fairlane Skyliner convertible, which is funny because I said, "Oh, I should try to find one of those." And he goes, "No, it was an awful car. Do not." So he made sure I knew that was not the car to take. But he went all the way out to California. And then once he got to California after driving Route 66, he that's where he met my mom while he was cruising Maine with an oversized teddy bear in the passenger seat of his convertible. And my mom totally fell for that. And he asked her out that night, and the next day they started dating. And I think 5 months later they were married. So, yes, my family kind of got its start. And you see that in the dedication in the book. My dad has since passed away, like I said, and my mom she has had to come to terms with that loss and being alone after being married for over 50 years.
Yeah.
And I believe the dedication says, because of Route 66, you found each other once. I pray that, you'll find each other again, this time on streets of gold, because that's what we know is coming because of the hope that we have in Jesus. So, yeah, that was part of my family's story.
So fun. Yeah. So that is very kind of a mirror to this Benny story that
Hmm.
of how she went with Paul. So I'm imagining that your parents' story kind of inspired that piece of it too, a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. That's one thing. And I shouldn't be sharing this because it's a little too personal, but I was just talking to my husband about this last night, where I said, when my mom passes, it will be the saddest day of my life because I love her so much and she's so much a part of my life. But I will know she's been reunited, not just with her savior, not just with her mom and her sister, but with her husband.
Yeah.
And it will be sad for me
Mhm.
that day, but there will be conflicting feelings. There
Yeah.
will be a certain level of joy
Yeah.
that I hope I'll find. And so yes, you could see I was already starting to kind of process that concept
Mm.
of what it would be like. There's a line where Benny says, "I don't like to think of him as being gone. I like to think of him as being just a little further up the road."
Yes, I love that quote.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel about my parents now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sweet. So, share with us a little bit about how your faith influences your career and your stories.
So basically, I mean, I never really intend for my books to have this major conversion moment or I'm gonna try to win souls to Christ, with in a mass number. It's never been about that. It's more wanting to let other people know that they're not alone in whatever they're facing. And the only way I know how to process those big issues personally is through the lens of faith and through the story of, Christ rising from the dead and us being redeemed. And so it's not that I'm trying to convert anybody or anything by any means, but I would hope that that is the result once they're able to see how my characters process this, how I process this. I mean, the level of grief, several of my stories deal with some form of grief because that I started writing after I lost my dad, and I deal with that through faith. A lot of it is how do you trust God when so much bad has happened in your
Yeah,
life, and the only way I know how to deal with that is through faith. And that is why there's a faith element in my stories. I
yeah,
don't think I could write an authentic story where the person wasn't leaning on their faith, at least towards the end, because I've been a Christian since I was 17.
yeah.
I have not always perfectly applied my faith to my
We
life and my
saw it.
issues, but I have it's always at least been there.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's more about authenticity for me.
right. Yeah, it sounds like it's just so much a part of who you are that it would be hard to not write that because it's just your worldview. And I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We need more people in the world sharing those good, hopeful, faith promoting stories.
Absolutely.
So we're
Yes.
glad that you have done that. So sometimes there is a piece of the author in the characters that they write. Would you say that there are parts of you that are maybe like Jade or Benny or one of the characters in the book?
So I I think each one of my four main characters, there is some trait that I share with them. Because again, there's that authenticity
Yeah.
moment where I I really just feel like I have to have something of myself in them, or else who am I to share their story?
Yeah.
Um, for the most part, I see myself more as Benny.
Hmm.
She is much more upbeat and happy. Just she's a little naive and always optimistic. I am not always optimistic. I I can make myself optimistic, but I am way more of that, melancholic personality that I have to really like care for myself through. Um, but obviously I can also be bubbly and optimistic, and I get really excited about things. Obviously, a Route 66 trip. So in that way, I was a lot like Benny. Jade is way too, I am not as put together as Jade used to be before her life fell apart. She
Yeah.
had everything in a row, and that is not me. But I like to think that I was more like her when she was a little girl. When you see her, and my favorite scene in this whole story is when she's a little girl and she first sees her face on the missing poster. But before that, she's running around with the little local boy, and they're chasing these burros, these wild burros that actually are so they're real. Like driving through Oatman, Arizona, this burro just walks up to my car and is just like looking at me right through my window. I think I was supposed to have food for him. I think that's why he came up. But yeah, there's these wild burros. And I love the part where she's just like, we've gotta stop this evil, donkey or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, we can't let her get away, not after she robbed that train full of nuns or something like that. And oh my gosh, like that was so my personality when I was little. I was feisty and sassy and so fun loving. And I don't know, like, where I lost some of that along the way, but Jade certainly lost it. And you see her hair has a story of its own in this book. And you see her hair slowly getting more and more wild throughout the story because she's going back to her roots
Yeah.
and who she was right at the start. She's not straightening her hair every day and making
Yeah.
sure that it's nice and sleek. And Bridger plays a role in that too with his French braiding her hair, and
Yes.
which is I love Bridger so much. And I love the fact that he could French braid hair. I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever seen that in a book before. And then the other thing, and I talked about this a little bit at the Mississippi River Readers Retreat, was the concept of adoption and
Mhm.
how adoption played a big role in this story. My own daughter was adopted transracially, and I have done a lot of studying because of my background in family life education. I have studied how great that can be and how challenging it can
Yeah.
be. And I mean, even this week, my daughter, who's 12, and I had discussions about the fact that she's Black, adopted into a white family, and the issues that she faces because of that.
Yeah.
And so, in a lot of ways, when Benny will do anything for Bridger,
Hmm.
and she just doesn't. Well, and then how his biggest flaw is he won't try to learn more about his birth culture because he doesn't want to hurt her. He
Yeah.
doesn't want her to think that he doesn't love her, that he doesn't appreciate her taking him in. And for me, if my daughter ever admitted that to me, it would break my heart
Yeah.
because I don't want her trying to protect me.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of that dynamic between Benny and Bridger is a scenario I hope I don't deal with my daughter. I hope that
Yeah.
we can have better communication than what they had through it. But I also hope that I can love her the way that Benny loved Bridger.
Mhm. Yeah. So your daughter, was she born here in this country or is she from another
Yes.
country?
Yes. So she was born in Ohio.
Okay.
But prior to adopting her, we had attempted to adopt transracially through Ethiopia.
Okay.
And the moment we sent in our dossier and the big check, there's a lot of big checks that you write when you're adopting
Yeah.
internationally, but this was the biggest check. The moment we sent it into our agency and they cashed it, they said, "Oh, there's been a problem. There's been a scandal in Ethiopia, and there has been a major slowdown in the rates of adoption. because s- some of the orphanages, including one of the ones that they worked with, were lying to the birth parents. And they were saying, we're just going to take your child to America to get an education. And then they will send money back to you, to your family, so that you can afford to feed your other children. And then they will come back once they turn 18, which is obviously not the situation in most transracial,
Yeah.
transnational adoptions. And that is exactly what happened in Samoa in the, in 1993, I think. I'm forgetting. I wrote this so long ago and did research so long ago. But when Bridger was born, that's exactly what was happening. Oh, I think it was 2003 because he was a little bit older. But that's exactly what happened. And I was so blessed to be able to meet a woman who was one of those children who was basically stolen from Samoa and brought to the United States and under false pretenses. And she was in that process of trying to find her birth family and go back and see her village. And she shared with me and talked with me about what she had, her struggles, what they had been, what it was like to find out about the scandal. And so that really played into Bridger's story.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what great research that you had a person who lived through it to really
Mhm.
give you that perspective. Very neat.
Right, right.
Well, I want to make sure I give everybody else a chance to make comments or questions. So if anybody has a comment or a question, feel free to unmute yourself or type something in the
Mhm.
chat if you have anything for Janine. Well, it looks like they do not. I guess I'm asking all the
I
right
think I
questions.
know, I think I know the question they all want to ask.
Okay, give it to
And
us.
it's, does Paul actually look like Paul Newman? And yes, he does. Paul Newman was the exact physical replica of Paul. I didn't even try to change his name. I just kept it Paul. And then when they said, "Oh, we're going to try to, we want to put the couple on the cover. What do they look like?" And I said, "The guy looks like Paul Newman." And when you look at the cover, he looks exactly like Paul Newman. So they really nailed it on that one. So yeah, I'm sure that's what you were all wondering. Does Paul actually look like Paul Newman? Yes. Yes, he does.
Little inside scoop there. So, talk to us a little bit about your writing process. You mentioned that some of these books you've written in 6 weeks, which is incredibly fast.
Mhm.
Is that typical for you, or was that just a rush job because you had a contract? Or
So I think I am I follow my whims, which
Mhm.
sometimes I get really excited about a story, and you will not. Like, once I get into a story, it is really hard to pull me away from the keyboard. You know, it's that concept of being in the flow
Yeah,
where you lose track of time and you don't even realize you're hungry. There have been times where I'll have to go to the bathroom and I just won't go. I'll just hold it because I am so into writing this scene. And I always get like that at some point in the story. For me, the hardest part is starting to write it because when they say imposter syndrome, it's absolutely real.
yeah,
I always think there's no chance I'm going to be able to recreate what I've done in the past.
yeah.
Because I'm so proud of the stories that I've written, but sometimes I'll look back and I'll go, I how did I write that? Or I'll read a line and go, did my editor write that? Because I couldn't have written that. And no, they don't write anything. If they don't like the way something sounds, they give it right back to the author and say change it. They don't
Yeah,
change it for you. And
yeah,
and so I think I'm just always super intimidated to start. Even with the story that I'm currently writing, I have the first couple chapters written, and I'm so afraid. What if it's not good? And what if it just lacks magic? That, every other one of my stories has found. So I just really have to trust that God will lead me. I always end up saying the same prayer every time I'm writing a story. And it's always, I get to a point where I just don't know what's going to happen in the story. I don't know how I'll get it done in time, like with
Yeah,
that first book. Um, something. Uh, Sometimes it'll be that like a story has been so crushing to me that it is emotionally hard to write the story. And those are the times where I just have to pray, like, God, if you want me to finish this story, if you want me to turn it in on deadline, you have to take the reins here. Like,
yeah,
I'm crawling out on this branch and I am praying that it is strong enough to hold me and praying that you are strong enough to hold me because otherwise, I can't do this on my own. And maybe that's not the wisest way to go about a career,
I
but
don't
it
think you can
definitely
go
keeps me
wrong with
focused.
partnering. I think you can never go wrong partnering with God.
Yeah, it definitely keeps me focused on him.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And so, with a busy household and four kids, um, are you writing every day? Do you have to take summers off because of the chaos, or how does that all work?
So when I am on deadline, I will write every day. When I'm not on deadline, I tend to I don't I don't write because I get so in my head and don't know what direction to go if I don't have somebody saying, "Yes, this is the story you should write."
Yeah,
And I think a lot of it's because I lost some of that naivete that I had when I first started writing. In a lot of ways, I should still be more like Benny and just believing if
yeah,
I write this, somebody will get to read it sometime.
right.
And that's been hard. I really, like I was saying about my dad when we first started, about the highs and lows of the writing career. I have said multiple times, I don't know that I have the ideal personality to be a writer because I take the lows so hard.
Yeah.
And everybody does, but it's just for some reason it just seems to hit me harder than everybody. I don't know. People are always like, bless your heart, you have a lot going on. I get that. I hear that more than anything else in my life. So bless my heart.
Uh, I enjoyed the book. I liked how the characters kind of unfolded with their stories. Um, my first introduction to Route 66 was a lecturer on a princess cruise to Hawaii, and he had all
Ooh.
sorts of slides from when his parents took him on Route 66, played the music of the day, and it was very entertaining. Then when we were in Los Angeles, we took the city bus to Santa Monica to see where it really ended. I was kind of sad
Yes,
that the story didn't really get to Santa Monica, but that's
I
okay.
know.
I grew up in Illinois, so Chicago is okay. Yeah, it's fun that it started there. Um,
Okay, so I mean, I don't know that the story would have ever worked out where they would have ended up at the
right,
sign.
right.
Um, but part of it was because I was so mad at Santa Monica Pier because I got there and it was not a good experience.
Ooh,
And I'm super emotional because I went by myself on this trip. So I had been completely alone. It was it was a lot driving that much. And you have a lot of time to think to yourself. And I got there and I took a picture and then I went to go ride on the Ferris wheel
mhm.
thinking this is going to be the penultimate moment. And they said, you can't write it. You can only write it if you have another person with you.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get to ride the Ferris wheel. And I was so disappointed. I just left. I put my feet in the Pacific Ocean just so that I could say I did. There were homeless people all around me. There was
Right.
trash washing up on the beach. And I was like, this is not magical. So I think that maybe that's why I didn't have them end right there on the pier.
Probably.
I was mad at it. But
My favorite part was about the quirkiness of Bridge doing the handstand in the elevator. Oh my goodness, that was fun. And
yes.
when I read that, I thought this is going to be a fun book.
Yes, I loved that part of his personality. And then I loved that Benny knew exactly what he was up to.
Yes.
Was he trying to impress you with that handstand in the elevator trick? I
Yeah,
used to
but
do that in college. Me and my roommates, we would actually do handstands in our dorm elevator because it was so difficult and it took a lot of muscle when you were going up and it was pushing you down and yeah. So I had a good visual for that one.
you've used a lot from your life in designing the characters and their interaction. I think that's great.
Yeah. So have you ever considered actually driving the route if you're from Chicago?
Not really. I think part of the reason that makes me not want to is that it seems that it's pretty chopped up at this point,
It
and you
is.
can't just drive straight through. It's like, oh no, we've lost it. It's over here, and oh, we got to go on the freeway for a little while, or so it. I don't know.
Exactly.
It's lost that interest, and we have other things we need to see.
Yeah, yeah. It is. It's frustrating that it is not just a straight line anymore. I had to follow a guidebook and it literally told you turn by turn to stay on Route 66. And then there were different eras of the road. So it would go one way in the 1930s, and then it would go another way in the 1950s. And so trying to follow that, when I went, I was trying to follow the exact route that my dad would have taken.
Mhm.
It was really cool in, I believe it's Southern Illinois. They have a space where it was 4 lane during the high point when it was
Mhm.
most traveled. And then when it wasn't traveled as much, they decided not to keep up the one side of the road just because it was so expensive. So they moved it back to 2 lane. And you can go, and they've done a really great job of turning this into a trail. And you can get out and you can stand. And I would put my hands down on the road where my dad would have driven. And it was just a really great moment. So Illinois has, and if you ever, I'm not sure where you live now, but if you ever get a chance to go to Pontiac, Illinois, that would be a great town to go visit and really get a lot of that Route 66 feel.
Mhm. We did take a trip and went to Wyoming and saw where a lot of the trails west converged. And they all went through the Rattlesnake Pass. And oh my goodness. So I stood on the Oregon Trail and Mormon Trail.
Oh, I would love to do the Oregon Trail. That would be another one.
Yeah.
Next book.
Would you want to write it in the days that the trail was used? Or in
Like,
current
would I
days?
have wanted to be back in time
No,
and
in
taken a
in a
wagon train?
no no in a book. In a book. What
Okay,
time period
listen,
would you write?
I have had a story idea for what if there was a company that offered wagon train rides on the Oregon Trail for people to experience what it would have been like. That was one of my story ideas that has never come to
Ah,
fruition, but maybe one day it will.
so current day.
I don't,
Okay.
I don't think I would want to take that research trip. Yeah, it would be a bit too much.
Right. Uh, but thank you for your book. It was good.
Thank you so much for
Mhm.
reading. Oh,
If
Sonia,
you,
I think
Sonia,
you're
you're muted.
muted.
We go. I was just going to
Yes.
say I live about an hour north of where the end of the Oregon Trail is, and you couldn't pay me to do that. No.
There's a show on, and I forget the name of it. It's had a bit of controversy with it, but it's a Chip and Joanna Gaines show, and it's a reality show where they took three families, and I think it's in Oregon, and they basically it's like back to pioneer life or something like that. And they're having to spend a whole summer living like those pioneers, and it looks miserable. I'd go
Show on
back to the
PBS.
1950s.
Yeah, PBS had a show like that where people went back to pioneer type living and had to do that for I don't know how long it was, but a little reality show. And that was probably 10 or 20 years ago. I can remember watching that. But yeah, no, not for me. When I remember when the guy on the show got a toothache and they talked about what the technique would have been. I was like, oh, no,
Yeah,
thank you. Like
yeah,
modern
no
medicine.
way.
Yeah.
No way. Maybe I would do the 1950s, but that's about it.
Well, Janine, before we have to go, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now? You hinted at it a little bit. You've got a book coming out 2026, is that right?
hmm
So tell
Yes.
us about that book. Give us a little teaser.
Okay, so that story I am publishing with Susan May Warren's
Oh,
publishing house.
yeah.
So she'll have her hand in it, which is amazing because she's brilliant. And I know she's really big into the romantic adventure stuff, but I love the romantic part of it especially. So I'm excited to have her touch on it. And it is basically if you've even seen these, Sweet Home Alabama meets Friday Night Lights. So it is about a country singer who comes back to her small town in Minnesota, and it's called Maple Lake. It's a fictional town where a bunch of these stories from Sunrise Publishing are going to be set. There's a bunch of different authors that, are writing a story and they're going to come out like 1 week apart. And I think it'll be a really cool experience to be able to be with these authors. But in my story, this country singer comes back to her hometown. She has a new hit single that is about the one who got away, this hometown love person that she was in love with. And the whole town is wondering which one of these two men that she had kind of had like a love triangle with when they were in high school, which one of them is the song really about? And so there's really not much mystery. I think everybody is going to know who it should be about and who she's meant to be with. But the hero is the high school football coach, so there's a lot of that, homecoming football game, that feel to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
And are you working on any other stories right now too, or just this one right now?
So I'll have the sequel to that one, which will come
Okay.
out the following spring. And that one's fun. I haven't gotten this one cleared yet, but I think it's going to be a female funeral director.
Oh,
And she's going to have a very quirky personality because I think you might have to if that's
yes.
your job to not get so weighed down by the grief that you see. So that should be a fun one. The funeral director and the bad boy is
Hey.
which will be a very interesting combination there. And then I'm just working on a couple smaller ideas that I can pitch to publishing houses about future stories. So this has been a really long break for me, and I don't want I don't want there to be another one because lose a sense of my my reason why I'm writing, and it
Yeah.
takes me a while to get back into it. So hopefully I'll be able to keep pumping out stories. Thank you so much for reading my story and inviting me to your book club. For those who are
Absolutely.
watching it recorded, thank you so much for taking the time to watch even this video with me. I appreciate it. You guys can always reach out to me on social media. Um, or you can follow me on on my website, I have a newsletter and I always ask some questions in my newsletter. And so we can have a conversation that way.
Well, you were talking about this female funeral home director, and I'm wondering, I had to look it up. Have you ever read Angela Hunt has a 3-book series about a female funeral home director?
No, I haven't, but I need to
You
because I
have
was
to.
told about that.
Love, love, love those books. Those were some of the first Christian fiction books I read. The first one's called Doesn't She Look Natural? And it's about a woman who inherits a funeral home from an uncle who died who didn't have any children. And she goes down there just thinking, I just got to figure out how to sell this and move on with my life and settle his estate, and gets sucked into learning how to and it was fascinating, fascinating books. So
I need to read that
I
book.
highly recommend. And it's a 3-book series, so all set in that funeral home. And I think it's like in Georgia or something like that is
Okay.
where it's set.
Okay.
But no, maybe it's Florida. I think it is Florida. I think it is
Okay.
Florida. But yeah, so I would highly recommend that book. So when I send out this email and in the notes for the recording on YouTube, I will have your website and Instagram. Is that your best place, or Facebook, or where do you like people to connect with you?
Um, Either Facebook or Instagram. Facebook is Instagram seems to be a little bit more steady with showing people what
Mhm.
they want to see. Facebook, they go back and forth. Sometimes if you're in a group, you'll see everything in a group, and then other times they decide they're not going to show any of the groups. So they're
Yeah.
so fickle. So Instagram might be the play.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure to get out links for everything. So if people are on Facebook, they can find you there, Instagram there, and we'll give them your website as well. So thank you again for this wonderful story and for spending the time with us to share all your backstory about Route 66 and your family. It was really fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. And Linda, if you're ever in the Belden Village area, come see me at our Chick-fil-A. I would love to have you there. We can meet in person.
Oh, that would be fun.